steadily it rises.
Hey, it's ODB, the Lincoln Addict, back with another listing review. So without further delay, let's jump right in. Today, we're going to look at a recent sale, 1964 Lincoln Continental sedan. At the end of this video, I'm going to do a comparison between this car and another comparable 64 sedan to kind of show, does customizing a Lincoln automatically mean more money? So I think that'll be a little bit interesting to the viewers. Thank you again for all of the support and continuing to watch the content here on the Lincoln Addict YouTube channel. All right, so this car did sell already. This is my grid. I like to reinforce that if we look at the sedan for 64, we know that there were 32,969 produced. And I just took this screenshot from Haggerty. I happen to be a customer, of course, no affiliation with them. And you can see the range for a 64 sedan is currently 46,000 to about 13,000. Now, if you look at the orange, you will see that there is a little bit of a decrease. So we've continued to hear people chime in via social media and here on YouTube saying, hey, the market is softening. We haven't necessarily seen that on a per sale perspective, in my opinion. However, the data doesn't lie. So, according to Haggerty, which they pull their numbers in from a lot of different places, a lot of different sources rather, and, they have it listed at about a 12% decrease for a particular time period. And you can actually kind of change that over the course of time, or you can change the grid on their website. But it just, for anything, I just want to throw it out there that there does appear to be a little bit of a decrease on the market softening, if you will. Of course, we do have a 10% for factory AC, so that 46,000, you would add approximately 5,000 to it to put us over 50,000 for the concourse condition 64. Now, I copied and pasted this right from the listing. What we can see is it lists that it has 15,000 miles shown. I truly don't believe it's a 15,000 mile car. As many of the old school folks watching this will know, the odometer on these vehicles rolls over. Back in that era, that's just the way it was. I don't know if they just didn't foresee going past 6 digits, or if it just was basic knowledge that, hey, when it rolls over, it's going to look like, it has, 15,000 miles, when in fact it probably has 115,000, or the speedometer gear and or cable, maybe hadn't been working and it didn't accumulate the miles that it actually had been driven. That's my opinion. Of course, we basically see the big thing here is 64. It's a black sedan, and it has custom wheels, and it has adjustable suspension, also known as air suspension. This one has a kit that's listed there, you can see. Now, if we look at the VIN plate, the number is listed there. Again, this is copy and pasted from Bring a Trailer, and it ends with that 31043. What that tells us, it's the 31,043rd off the line for that production model year, if you will. And we can see at the bottom, I've tallied those numbers, 36,297. That doesn't include the 15 limos, if you will, that put it over 36,300. This is from Bring a Trailer. So they do a good job, in my opinion, of decoding this, although it's kind of scratched down a little bit. That's the main reason that you've got the embossed numbers and letters. It is a little bit tough to read, but certainly we can make out. And again, they have the correct information. The main thing is, being later in that production model year, that gives us the date of this 22D like Delta. So if you count on your fingers, A, B, C, D, D is the fourth letter in the alphabet. That indicates the fourth month of the year, which is April. The 22 designates the 22nd day of that month. So again, we know it was April 22nd. In this case of 64, remember the production year starts in 63, kind of the mid to end of summer, and it's going to run through the mid to end of summer of 64. Again, that's why we see that it's, a higher number, that 31,000, if you will, into production line. The other stuff is pretty much standard. Now, what I want to do is go back over to the listing and just kind of look at some of the stuff. Now, if we go down here, they do in the main body of the description. Like a trailer does a good job of kind of just reinforcing a few key items. And what they talk about are the LED headlights. They talk about the wheels, 18-inch, with the custom, obviously kind of a lower profile tire. It has the air suspension system, which we will see. It talks about some of the air suspension components. The brakes were redone, the shoes, if you will, because it still has, the pre 65 drums, if you will, front and back. And they go into a little bit of detail here, just talking about some of the things that have been done. And then we can see some of the photos, including this MEL 430, which we can see, of course, has the desirable 3-port, not the 2-port, but we want the 3-port Carter fuel pump, which it has. We also see that it is an AC car. We can see the AC compressor here. We also see that it has the fan shroud, which is key. Again, if we're looking back at the Haggerty numbers, that would add about 10%. So about 5,000 extra for it. They talk about there was also an upgrade of the alternator. The factory alternator, I believe, was 45 amps, if I remember correctly. And it was fine for the car, but you start adding in air compressors and any other electronics, and you're quickly going to need to upgrade. There's plenty of companies out there, including Jeff at Devious, one of our key partners here at the podcast and the YouTube channel in general. They also note the underhood insulation. I forget what the cost is on that, but I mean, it definitely looks nice, and you'll kind of see that. This is a key thing I've always talked about since the infancy of this channel, is seeing images and or photos underneath a car. That is a must. What we can see here certainly is the rear section of the vehicle. The exhaust looks really nice. It may not be totally perfect with some of the other photos you're going to see, but I can tell you this. If you took your car to an exhaust shop and you said, hey, I've got a stock Lincoln, I want to do some nice exhaust all the way back from the manifolds, it's not super cheap. I mean, it's going to be 1,500, $2,000, depending on where you go and what material, of course, that you use. And if you go back with the factory muffler and resonators, a lot of folks will get rid of the mufflers and or resonators. And what we can see here is we've just got the mufflers in the back, the mufflers, and then there's typically resonators as well. That adds, additional a layer of quietness to these cars, if that makes sense. But certainly, I'm sure this car we can hear from the videos probably sounds pretty good. I love my 64 Lincoln with just the 2 mufflers that I have on it. I'm not going to play the videos. You guys can kind of go back and do those if you'd like. What we can see from this angle here, though, is it does have the single pot or single master cylinder, single pot, if you will. I know some folks will chime in and say, yes, it does have speed control, which is also known as cruise control. And I know some folks will say you really can't fit a dual master with the speed control. I have seen it done. Anybody that is, a pretty solid mechanic is going to be able to kind of make a little bit of room if need be. And I have seen it done, and I can't find any photos of it, but certainly I know some folks are going to, maybe hone in on that, and that's fine. You could leave a single pod if you really want, but it's really, to me, a safety item. Just have a dual reservoir. I do believe that it was upgraded at some point to a newer single reservoir. With the 64, what you could see here, they want to indicate like what's the drive height and what's the aired out height. So we can see here pretty much looks stock, other than what you can kind of see in the back a little bit with the components, because the leaf springs are removed. And here is going to be your aired down, or kind of pancaked, if you will, stance on these cars, right? It's very desirable for, I know it's not for everyone, but I want to go back to the price of this car, what it sold for, in just a moment. I know air suspension isn't for everyone, like I just said. However, it's very desirable for, different generations of people, younger folks, people like from even my generation. I've been around air suspension since the mid 90s. It is very reliable. The thing that I totally understand about running this channel and the social media in general for Lincoln Addict, which is my brand, is not everyone is a fan of air suspension, and that is totally fine. So I'll talk about in a few moments what that would mean if you were looking to buy this car when it was up for auction. The internet is being a little bit wonky right now here, it looks like. But if you were to scroll through all of these photos, you're going to see like pretty much the standard stuff. Pretty much a stock car overall. Okay. The insulation photo here, you can see how nice it looks. It looks way better than the tattered insulation that we often see, or insulation that's just non-existent in these cars. We also have some of the key images that we need to see, and that is up underneath the car, right? So we need to see what it looks like, and it's very clean, and I would say solid overall from everything that we can see underneath this car. It's not perfect, but it's way better than most, and it's way cleaner than most, in my opinion. I think they did a good job. Had this car, trying to kind of give it a nice presentation underneath without hiding anything. I think that that's really an important thing. We can see it obviously still has the factory gas tank as well, which is right in here. Okay, so if we look at some of the pros of this listing, it's a complete car. It's black in color. Whether you love or hate it, black typically is a color that a lot of people are looking for. They love the color. If they want to change it, they can, but certainly this being a triple black car, or, black interior, black exterior, no convertible, if you will, but that's something to kind of point out. Minimal modification. So yes, it is airbagged. That could be removed, but I highly doubt the folks that are, the person that purchased this car is going to remove it. Clean and solid from what I can tell on the undercarriage. The trunk is clean. Okay. We didn't look at that. We'll jump back over there. And then it does have speed control, which is a rare feature overall. And as promised, here is the trunk. The reason why I say the trunk is a lot of times the trunks are tattered on these cars, or if there's air suspension, like even my trunk isn't fully built out on my 64. So you'll see them for sale a lot like that. This one at least has some custom panels that kind of gives it a little bit nicer black, if you will, a presentation that's also hiding the air suspension components behind that little kind of false wall, if that makes sense. Now, here are some things to consider, right? If this car was still up for sale and you were looking to buy it, or maybe you were perusing the site and you saw it, if air suspension isn't your thing, I would certainly say steer clear. The worst that could happen is you buy it. Maybe you don't want the air suspension and you take it to a place to kind of retrofit it back to the leaf springs and the springs up front. You can get springs for these cars in the front. There were a couple of companies, I don't know if they're both in business any longer, making new leaf springs, which is not a bad thing for the back either. I've seen folks take their, like my 65, for instance, if I were to take that and put some brand new springs that are made for this car in the front, and then, put some new leaf springs in the back, it's going to ride even better, right? It's got 60-year-old tire components underneath it. Now, you could argue, do you want to keep it original or not? But in the case of this particular car, something you have to keep in mind is if the person that's selling the vehicle, which we see in the photos, he does have the wheels in the original wheel covers, but not everyone keeps the factory other components, right? So as an example, on my 64, I kept the original wheels and tires, and I have plenty of wheel covers, but I chose not to keep the leaf springs and other components. Number one, I knew this car is never going to go back to stock as far as when I own it. And number two, in the event that somebody ever took possession of it and they wanted to some reason bring it back to a showroom condition, then they're probably going to end up getting someone to make a new set of leaf springs. Let's be honest. I mean, there are folks out there that make those. It also has a single pot reservoir, as I mentioned. I mean, that's minor, I think, in the grand scheme of things. But what we could see from this car overall is it sold with no reserve for $28,500. That is well below where Haggerty was showing their price of a concourse car, right? Now, we could easily argue and say, hey, is it a concourse car? No, we absolutely know that it's not. But what we have typically seen over the past, I'll call it 10, even 15 years, right, going back to 2010, is customized Lincolns do often bring some very, very, very solid dollars. I think it's gotten to the point where someone takes a nice sedan like this and they say, hey, let's go ahead and bag it, which, by the way, depending on what components you use and what air management you use, like this car has airlift on it, you can easily be $5,000 to $10,000 easy depending on who installs it and, if you ratchet some of those components up, right? So let's just say conservatively, this person has 7,500 in their time, the parts, or the components rather, in the parts to bag this car. Then you start to go, well, wow, if I were to take that off the price, I mean, we're looking at a $20,000 sedan, right? Would the sedan have sold for more without the air suspension? I mean, we don't know 100%, but I'm going to show you an example now. The reason why I say this is often people will ask me, what is my car worth? And it is not an easy thing to it's not an easy answer is the best way I can explain it. Yes, we can look at what I love looking at data, and we can usually get a little bit of a gauge on where something's going to sell. But something like this, right? Would it have been better taking it to an auction other than bring a trailer? Possibly. I mean, if we look at Barrett Jackson and we look at Meekum, we know that we've seen some insane prices from those auctions. But I would say this: I love bring a trailer. If you're looking to kind of move something, put it on there. It's better in my opinion than like Marketplace. If you're going to go Marketplace, maybe for like a week, and if you don't get any hits and it's all tire kickers, then go ahead and put it on bring a trailer, certainly. But I caution you, don't feel like you're going to put a lot of money in your Lincoln and to enjoy it and then think 100% I'm going to get all of this out. It just doesn't always work that way. There are cars, as I've often said, that sell for way more than I think they're worth. And there's often cars that sell for nowhere near what I think that they're worth. It's just the way the game goes, it seems. Okay. So as an example, this was 2 days ago. So at the time of this recording is October 21st, 2025, Back to the Future Day for you Back to the Future fans. But 2 days ago, on or around October 19th, 2025, this car sold for $28,500. Now, if we go to bring a trailer and we just search 1964 Lincoln, yes, back in May 2025, there was a sedan that sold for $24,250. Okay. Now, I'm not going to go into that car at this time, but that's one example there. And then we go, wow, if we go back just another week from there, here's a car that looks similar to it. Okay. This car was sold for $52,500. So let's take a look here real quick. First thing I like to do is look at, this was of course a California car. We can see here the VIN ends with 27997. So we know, number one, it's not the same car. But you would say, well, Jason, I want to bag my car, and I know eventually I'm going to be able to sell for 50 grand. This example right here is a black sedan, airbagged, with arguably some good components on it. Didn't even hit 30,000, okay, with no reserve. We have a car that, of course, you could argue a lot has happened in the world in the last 6 months, 5-6 months. But at the very end of April 2025, this 64 sedan sold for $52,500. What's the big difference? Like, you look at this and go, okay, well, they didn't make headrests. That looks a little bit weird. It is an AC car. It's got the MEL 430. It doesn't look as nice underneath. It's maybe not as shiny. It looks solid, so on and so forth. The big difference is this car is original. Okay. And the only point that I wanted to make is, sure, if the car had a Coyote engine and it had even more customized to it, it could have went for a lot more, arguably. But I caution people all the time, don't just think that you're going to bag your car. I've seen people even do engine swaps and not make the money out of it. It's a very big risk at the end of the day. I only do this as a hobby. I own a couple of Lincolns. I'm constantly around Lincolns because of my friends and, Lincoln Land and things like that. So I'm very fortunate for that. But just caution yourself. You're not always going to get the money out of it. If this person had bought maybe that sedan that we looked at a moment ago, let's say they spent $18,000 on it, and they put 7, 8, 10 grand in the suspension, and they did some other components as well. I mean, the wheels, let's not forget the cost of those. They easily could have, marked this down on their sheet at the end of the year as like this was a loss for them. It certainly probably was. So with that being said, let me know, do you think $28,500 was a good price for this 64 sedan? I'm dying to know what you think. I appreciate all the support. Stay on the rise. ODB, we out of here. Peace.
Welcome to LA where the players play, and we ride on them things like every day.